Garmagus Joe. Good morning and thank you for coming this morning, and thanks again to Joe and the committee for inviting me to speak. I suppose by right, according to statistics and studies, I, firstly as a young person, but secondly as a woman, probably shouldn't even be here as an elected councillor. And some may say that because of that, I'm a rare breed and they might want to see me stuffed and mounted, and others might just want to see me stuffed and mounted, but I'll let you make up your own minds on that. When I was contacted to speak today, it sent my mind back to how I ended up where I am, what drove me to get involved in politics, but more so what drove me to seek elected office. This wasn't always a road that I had planned on going down, and it certainly wasn't a road where the odds of success were stacked in my favour. But as an enthusiastic fresher in NUI Galway, I was one of those people that Daithí worries about, and I joined Over Fianna Fáil on the campus. But I'd grown up around politics, as Joe mentioned, with my mother being a senator. And of course, because of this, many will say that this is a path that I was always going to go down, that I was always going down this road. And in ways, there is a truth in that. But in other ways, that could not be further from the truth. The truth is that politics was always around when I was growing up. I was exposed to it from a very young age. It was discussed in my house, at the dinner table, on the phone. But it wasn't really a foregone conclusion that I would become politically active. But fast forward to just over 2 years ago, when I got the notion that I wanted to run for the county council. My mum, having been down that road before, spent almost 2 full weeks trying to talk me out of it. But one of the traits that we do share is that we have a stubborn streak. And she knew that once my mind was made up, I wasn't going to be talked out of it. I, like many of my peers, had been becoming increasingly disillusioned with the political system, hearing friends and colleagues question the value of voting, thinking that they couldn't trust the political system or the people that were in it. And as someone who believes greatly in a democratic system, and believes that the more citizens who are involved in the process, the better it will work. The thought of these people, my own friends, not wanting to vote, not seeing anyone out there worth voting for, just wasn't good enough. But I wasn't naive enough to think that one county councillor could change this. I saw a changing landscape in my own party, and I saw it in other parties, with a strong wave of first-time candidates coming forward, and I thought that maybe there was the opportunity there to change things. Of course, this is my story, and not every 28-year-old wants to run a local election campaign. There is a bigger issue as to why young people are not engaging in politics. And it should be noted, and Daithí did mention, that Gary and I were certainly not the only young candidates who ran last May. Far from it. Nearly 1 in 8 candidates who contested the local elections were under the age of 35. And the young candidates who got the opportunity to run, they fared very well. The electorate liked them. Collectively, young candidates won twice as many votes as the Labour Party. So this begs the question, why are we not running more young candidates? This is a trend that I think we're going to see changing. Over 90% of Sinn Féin candidates under 35 were elected. My own party, Fianna Fáil, ran more young candidates than any other party, and 65% of these candidates were elected. These are figures that the parties cannot ignore and that they will be keen to capitalise on. The challenge for us is to get young people interested in and excited about politics. And of course, the simplest way to be politically active is to cast your ballot on polling day. But you can't cast a ballot unless you're registered to vote. And it's interesting to note that numerous studies have shown that the number one reason amongst young people for not voting is that they're not registered to vote. Yet there have been no moves to upgrade or modernise our cumbersome registration system. By simply moving to a system of automatic registration when a citizen turns 18, linking it to their PPS number, we could remove this barrier to young people from becoming politically active. And that way, being politically active isn't about being registered to vote. It's about showing up to vote. People are motivated to vote when they see that there are issues at stake that affect themselves. And over the years, we have seen the political parties play on this. From promises of increasing the state pension, no cuts to core payments, abolishing stamp duty, keeping hospitals open, we've heard them all. And of course, political parties should lay out manifestos with their ideas and visions. What I am arguing is that political parties and independents alike have a responsibility to voters, that the proposals they put forward should be reasonably achievable. As a first-time candidate, I received more than a few lambastings during the campaign about the actions and decisions of those who had gone before me in my own party. And it took my confidence a little while to recover when I realised that my offer of shiny and new, open and transparent politics wasn't as well received as I'd imagined. I was painted as being the same as the rest of them, as they thought it wouldn't be long until I was lining my pockets. And as a first-time candidate, excited about running and keen to make an impact, this hardened negative attitude was tough to take. A CSO survey after the last general election showed that almost 3/4 of students had voted. This was a big jump from 2002, where only half of students had voted. But you may remember that during the 2011 general election, there was a well-coordinated campaign by the Union of Students in Ireland on the issue of student fees. On the back of this campaign, Rory Quinn signed his now infamous pledge outside of the iconic gates of Trinity College that he would not increase student fees, including the student contribution charge. And we all know what happened there. Having wooed the students during the campaign, the student contribution charge has risen 3 times since 2011 and is set to go up again to €3,000 by 2015. For many young people, general election 2011 was their first trip to the ballot box. And broken promises like these leave people twice shy about placing their faith in politics again. And who can blame them for being cynical, when over the years all parties have been guilty of this kind of conduct? I think we need to understand that we're dealing with a new electorate, and it just simply doesn't make sense to sell them old politics. So that's my take on what causes apathy. We've also been asked to consider who can solve it. And as the president of the youth wing of a political party, I think it would be absurd if I didn't think that political parties had some role to play in finding the solution. However, in reflecting honestly on my campaign trail, it would not be an exaggeration to say that being a member of a political party, any party, was a negative in the eyes of many voters. The most common question I faced on the doorsteps did not relate to the big issues in my constituency: property tax, job creation, the regeneration of Blackrock Village. It didn't even relate to the now infamous soap opera that Joe referred to in Blackrock during the campaign. The single most common remark that I encountered was, "Fair play to you for running. It's great to see young people getting involved. But why aren't you running as an independent? I'd vote for you if you were an independent." Now, that wasn't anti-Fianna Fáil sentiment, although I did get that as well. That was anti-political party sentiment, a plague on all our houses. And in fact, it would be fair to say that on many doorsteps, we had to actively battle against apathy towards political parties for people to even talk to us, let alone give us a vote. So from my own experience and from talking to friends and colleagues, I can confidently say that that situation is much worse amongst the under-40s. And in one sense, this shouldn't be particularly surprising, seeing that we are the generation who have broken the traditional ties between party and family loyalties. However, the fact that independent and smaller party candidates polled better than Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and polled better than Sinn Féin and Labour combined, presents fundamental questions around the very purpose of political parties within our system. Young people are fed up with political parties patronising the electorate, with manifestos based more on poll findings than leadership. This is a young country, and our independence was brought into being by young people, by young leaders. The first Executive Council was primarily composed of men in their 30s. W.T. Cosgrave, who was the elder statesman in that government, was only 42, almost 30 years younger than Michael Noonan, the man widely regarded as the elder statesman in the current government. And nobody could have accused that generation of apathy. The challenge of that generation was to bring an independent Ireland into being. And while the challenges we face today are different, Do any of us believe that our young people are any less idealistic than the men and women of 1916, 1918 or 1922? Frankly, there's much that we need to be idealistic about. 1 in 4 young people in Ireland is unemployed, and many face the bleak prospect that with no chance of getting a job at home, moving abroad may be their only option. As a nation, we have the highest suicide rate in the EU for teenage girls and the second highest rate for teenage boys. And if politicians and political parties in particular are seen as incapable of providing answers to these problems, then that apathy amongst young people is going to last long into adulthood. It also leaves fertile ground for exploitation by extremist elements, something that we're already seeing happening across Europe with the rise of far-right parties. And ironically, these parties have absolutely no problem in turning apathy into action amongst young people. So how do we address this? An obvious way to start resonating with young people on their issues is to give more credence to the views of young people already in the political parties. And I can assure you that across all of the youth wings, there is no shortage of views, and there's certainly no lack of enthusiasm for putting them forward. But ultimately, our parties need to give these views a real voice by putting forward and supporting more young people at election time, so that they can go on and represent these views at elected level. The class of 2014, the young councillors who won seats along with myself and Gary last May, have a serious responsibility, but a great opportunity to show that not all politicians are the same. Across all political parties and outside of the parties, we have the opportunity, if we can think collectively, to change how politics works and happens in our young state, to set a different standard. And of course this is hard due to competing interests, but we have a responsibility to do it. For the first time in a long time, the need is there and the scale of numbers is there to make it happen. We must pledge ourselves to dwell more on proposing solutions rather than making political capital out of failures. This is the old instinct with all parties, and frankly, it's just not acceptable anymore. We are constantly told that we are one of the most educated countries in Europe. Then why is it that at election time, political parties treat us like fools instead of the educated people that we are? Now, I'm not going to stand here and pretend to be a self-appointed spokesperson for my entire generation, and nor do I suggest that I have easy solutions to decades of public disengagement with politics, particularly acute amongst young people. But I would suggest that in attempting to do something about it, providing more of the same isn't a good place to start. We have to radically change the way in which politics operates in this country. A good place to start in advance of the next general election could be for politicians to decide to treat the electorate and their issues with respect, not to patronise them, and to show that politics is a force of positivity and the art of the possible, as opposed to campaigns of cheap soundbites. In a famous speech to a graduating class at a university in Georgia in 1932, President Franklin Roosevelt said, "The country needs, and unless I mistake its temper, the country demands, bold, persistent experimentation. It is common sense to take a method and try it. If it fails, admit it frankly and try another. But above all, try something." Ladies and gentlemen, in the Ireland of 2014, we need to try something too. Gur Mágaibh.